How you doing, guys? This is Eric from rulethewasteland.com and secretoftheinternet.com. Wanted to do a quick video about the really unprecedented amount of scandals that have been coming out against pretty much both candidates, but particularly Hillary Clinton in this election, like in the last few weeks leading up to the actual election on November 8th. We've seen a very particular kind of focused attack against Donald Trump with these allegations of sexual assault and sexual misconduct and things like that, like I mentioned in the last video, people are really not taking seriously because of the way that they're being released, and obvious evidence of collusion and the total lack of evidence in most of these cases, that they're just being overlooked even though they're piling on. And they're piling on to the point where it's just not even believable anymore. Like I mentioned, that the idea that this guy has just been behaving like this for decades and decades and no one bothered to mention it until now, 2 weeks before the election, is just fairly absurd. But on the other side of the aisle, we have someone who is embroiled in more controversies than any other political candidate in the history of this country, that more than in any other candidate I can ever think of. The pure amount of scandals and allegations of various kinds of misconduct and cronyism and actual illegal activity that has been offered against Hillary Clinton is just staggering. I mean, if you look at there's probably 30 or more individual things that have been released that should be able to render someone unfit to be president of this country. When you start from the medical stuff, the things she's done before becoming even a politician, such as like getting rapists off and laughing about it, going after accusers of Bill Clinton and actually threatening them and trying to intimidate them into dropping her stories, and all the Benghazi scandal where American servicemen and ambassadors were killed due to her decision-making or lack thereof. We have everything going on with the Clinton Foundation and the pay-for-play stuff, including files that have been released from the Guccifer 2.0 hack where folders were uncovered that were literally named pay-for-play, folders in the Clinton Foundation servers or computers actually named pay-for-play. And then this newest barrage of WikiLeaks email. Well, first we had the WikiLeaks emails from the primaries showing that they definitely conspired together to oust Bernie Sanders. Fortunately for them, they were able to gain his compliance because he's corrupt or pushover or scared or whatever, or greedy, and just wanted to be able to buy his new $600,000 lake house. So they were able to buy his compliance, and he's still supported and endorsed Hillary Clinton and hasn't changed his tune on that, even despite all this evidence coming out that he was royally and probably illegally screwed over. Now we have newest allegations, or not even allegations, it's proof from all these Podesta email leaks that showing all this various types of collusion with the media, direct collusion with the media, just an amazing amount of scandalous things going on, saying how, showing her saying different things to her Wall Street donors, showing exactly what she said to them, and then including that she has public and private positions, basically saying, don't worry what you hear me say to these stupid people. This is what I have as my position in private to the people that matter, because you guys are supporting me. Emails where where they're literally saying they're counting on a dumb and compliant citizenry to vote for her, where it helps them if the voters are stupid, talking about how they're going to head off all these other scandals. There was just an unending barrage of these things that even individually should be disqualifying, and there's just nonstop dozens and dozens of different types of misconduct and proof of all these things in these emails. Pretty wild. Talking about how she's going to use executive actions on gun control, have her statements to these Wall Street groups where she's saying she's against marijuana legalization in all senses. So that's interesting, because you have all these hippie Bernie Sanders supporters who that is a huge issue for them. And then you have Trump, who's come out, his official platform is decriminalize on a federal level, make it legal medically throughout the country, and then other than that, leave it up to states' rights, which at this point is fairly obviously saying, let's go ahead and legalize it, because the vast majority of states in the country, if you put it to a popular vote, legalization would pass, especially in a 50-50 situation. Now, Florida, interestingly enough, we recently had that vote come up, and because the marijuana illegalization, or the reason why marijuana was illegal here, is a constitutional amendment. It's not just a normal state statute. So it required something like 60% to change a constitutional amendment as opposed to 50%. So even though the vote that was taken a couple years ago got 58% or 57% or something like that, it didn't pass, even though that was much higher of a vote percentage than the marijuana legalization votes that happened in Washington State and in, I think, Oregon and a couple other states that did pass. They passed theirs with 52, 54%, and we didn't pass ours with 56 or 58% because it's a constitutional amendment that had to be overrun. I think one more time and it will get through, but it's interesting that she has that come out. Well, she hasn't come out, but it has been revealed that she is totally opposed to marijuana legalization in all senses, meaning probably not medical, no states' rights. Like, she just wants it to be illegal because she's in the pocket of all these big businesses, and there's no other than the businesses that actually sell the marijuana, the dispensaries and things like that, which are primarily small companies, sole proprietorships, partnerships, things like that. They're small businesses. They make a lot of money, but the cigarette companies would probably lose money. Certainly a lot of pharmaceutical companies would lose money because you could just resort to medical marijuana or recreational marijuana for all sorts of different ailments. Even if it's not the best, there's low side effects. It's fairly cheap compared to pharmaceuticals. You don't need a prescription if it's legalized in these states, and you can get it whenever you want. So there's a lot of people who this should be a game changer for them. We'll see if it is, because a lot of these people are probably just too appalled at the idea of Trump because they're listening to the mainstream narrative. But this should be a big, big issue for a lot of people who were probably Sanders supporters, may now be Johnson or Jill Stein supporters. But of the two candidates that are going to win, I mean, let's be honest here, as much as I'd like to see third parties rise in prominence over the next few years, and I think they will, we're not yet at the point where either one of these candidates, Jill Stein or Gary Johnson, are even going to come close to winning. It's not even very likely at all that Johnson is going to win New Mexico, but then even if he does, he's certainly not going to win any other state. So if he gets 10% of the vote or something, that's great, but either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton is going to be president. So if that's a big issue for you, the marijuana legalization, then obviously Trump is the one who you should support, because he has come out and explicitly stated he's for national decriminalization at a federal level and making it a states' rights issue, and marijuana medical legal in all states. So even if the states say we don't want to decriminalize recreational use, you still would be able to have medical marijuana in all 50 states under a Trump administration, which is fairly useful because as it stands now in most places, if you're talking about anxiety or trouble sleeping or maybe generalized pain, fibromyalgia, it wouldn't be hard to get a doctor to tell you that you could be prescribed marijuana in most cases. But that is a massive, massive amount of scandals. We've also heard, I was just talking about Jill Stein. So a lot of the people that were Bernie supporters, maybe now Johnson or Jill Stein supporters, or Jill Stein especially, because she's the actual far left candidate. Of course, Johnson is presented as a libertarian candidate. I don't think he's actually a very good example of a libertarian, but Jill Stein is the really far left candidate, whereas Hillary Clinton's not that far left on all these issues. Like we said, medical marijuana, she's against it. She's pro-wars. She's pro the big banks. She talks a big game on stuff like taxes and everything. But if you look at these Wall Street speeches and all her actual decisions, she was against gay marriage in the past. She's on video saying she's against it. All these things, if you just wrote her particular policy positions down on paper, with the exception of maybe her amnesty, she's pretty much a neocon, like a George Bush or someone, because even those people are all pro amnesty in at least measured amounts. They're not focusing on closing the borders. They're not talking about really cutting down on it. So if you took her face off the policy positions, it would be very hard to distinguish her from a Paul Ryan or somebody like that. So it's hilarious that she's viewed as a left candidate when really somebody like Jill Stein is much more actually a liberal in the modern sense of the word. But Jill Stein had recently come out and said, when it comes to foreign policy, Trump has a better plan because he's not going to plunge us into war with Russia, where at the debates, Hillary's out there looking like some crazy redneck with a fallout shelter, blabbing on about how Russia this, Russia that, and they're hacking everything. And not that my emails got hacked because they didn't, but Russia's behind all this hacking and all this, and just talking about Russia in almost like McCarthy level of paranoia. Really bizarre. And this is from this nominally Democratic candidate, which is particularly interesting. It's not really that surprising once you understand that these parties are not that different, at least when it comes to the leadership. And you see that with all the leadership of the Republican Party, not the rank and file Republican members, but the actual party leadership is looking and taking any little opportunity to jump ship. See that with when the Trump tapes came out, it's like they were planned. Mike Cernovich actually thinks that this was actually orchestrated by GOP leadership and not by the Democratic Party or by Hillary Clinton's campaign, but actually by somebody like a Paul Ryan, maybe even Reince Priebus or other higher level GOP operatives trying to get rid of him because they were all ready to jump ship. They all had statements that were remarkably similar. And we have people like Glenn Beck even supporting Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. So you can't really argue any longer that these parties are fairly similar, at least when it comes down to who they're going to support as president. Now, there's certain issues that they break on one way or the other, maybe like abortion or something, but as a whole, they're remarkably similar. And now we have someone here like Trump who's opposed by all of them, and that even further proves when these people all coalesce against him, it shows that their interests are aligned, at least when it comes to beating him. And so you have to think about why that is. And when everyone I hate is lined up against somebody, all other things being equal, I'm going to side with that person, even though he's not perfect. But before I get too far off topic, like I said, Jill Stein mentioned even that Trump is a person that has a better foreign policy, safer for the U.S. It's not as aggressive. He's not going to plunge us into war. So that's very interesting. So we could see some of these Bernie supporters, some people who are nominally or actually liberal, and they're not just going to the people who won't just vote Democratic no matter what, but actually care about these issues from a socially liberal mindset. Maybe even some of the Johnson supporters. I think most of them, if they decide not to go third party when it comes down to it, Trump is the one who actually has a much more liberal, socially liberal in the classical sense of the word, stance on all these issues, on military aggression and foreign policy, on medical marijuana and just marijuana legalization, on guns and all these other things, that he's actually the more classically liberal person. So it'd be interesting to see if those people actually break for him if they decide not to go through with their third-party vote. And we have all, okay, sorry, got confused for a second. In addition to the scandals that I've already mentioned, we have a few that still have yet to come out. We have O'Keefe, the guy from Project Veritas, who has busted a bunch of big things over the years past and has been a pretty big thorn in the side of the progressives and the Democrats for the past few years, has claimed that he has a bunch of bombshell videos, which will start with regional bombs, which he's already released a few of, and culminating with what he calls an atomic bomb that has something to do with Hillary and some sort of proof video, either audio or video, of her saying something racist or derogatory towards some sort of minority group. And that's expected to be released probably tomorrow, maybe Tuesday, but certainly sometime this week. It makes sense that he would do it before the debate. The small videos that he's released so far have shown a New York Democratic, I think it was a Democratic Party official, just openly admitting that they know that there's a lot of corruption, that there's a lot of voter fraud. And then there's another video where he, I forget who was talking, but I think it shows some kind of evidence where she said, she was talking about how they're going to try to use executive action on guns to bypass any Supreme Court. She thinks the Supreme Court was wrong on the individual right to bear arms, and she would use executive actions to try to control that in some way. I don't think it said exactly how. So those have actually come out. Those have been his regional bombs, but the atomic bomb, so-called, is still yet to be released, probably within 24 hours at this point, certainly within 48. Beyond that, we have Matt Drudge of the Drudge Report has released a tweet that said, oh, on the sex stuff, Hillary Clinton's about to get hers, like referring to how there's sex scandals with Donald Trump. And he posted a picture of Hillary on the Ellen DeGeneres show, which in my mind leads me to believe that it's going to be some sort of, like some sort of homosexual allegation or affair that she's had in the past, or at least allegations. So we'll see what happens with that. And no indication of when that's going to be released as far as I know. So who knows what's going to come with that. Allegedly, Mike Cernovich, I didn't see where he said this, but the channel Styx Hexenhammer, which it's a good channel. He's been talking a lot about this stuff. I'll put a link in the description. He'd mentioned that Mike Cernovich had announced that the 33,000, deleted emails from Hillary Clinton's server, which were not turned over to the FBI or the Justice Department, have been recovered and will be released soon, which is very interesting because everyone assumed those were lost to posterity if they were actually deleted or in acid washed with BleachBit. But you have to think that a lot of people assume that this server had been breached at some point before these allegations actually were brought to the public, and that any number of people could have these things. The Russians could have them, the hackers could have them. This was just a normal private email server, would not have been difficult to break into. We've seen that they've broken into all these other servers like Podesta, they've into the national DNC, the Democratic National Committee servers, so it's not crazy to think that they've broken into these and that these emails are out there somewhere. And you also have to assume that with all the scandalous things that we saw in the emails that she did turn over to the FBI, she didn't even delete all the ones that contained classified material. There were at least several hundred emails that contained actual classified material in the ones that were turned over to the FBI. So you have to assume that the ones that were deleted by her, 33,000 of them, would contain the real juicy stuff. If she still had evidence of illegal activity and various kinds of malfeasance in the emails that she turned over, who knows what's in the ones that she didn't turn over, but certainly probably more impactful to the election than that. So we'll see if, I don't think anyone else that I know of has corroborated this. We'll see if he comes through with that. I have no reason to think that he would have just completely made that up. There's not much for him to gain by doing that. So hopefully those will come out at some point in the near future as well. We have the next debate on this Wednesday, I believe the 19th. So, and that's the final debate. So if we have O'Keefe's atomic bomb come out on Monday or something, Drudge Report has his thing supposedly dropping soon. We have continued Podesta emails, and WikiLeaks is already on their 9th or 10th dump of different emails, and they've been getting progressively worse to the point where we may actually be seeing emails to and from Hillary Clinton herself and not just talking about her and her policies and her high-level people. So it does not look good for her. Like I mentioned before, I think some of her supporters are almost going to vote for her no matter what, but this constant barrage of obvious collusion with the media, obvious legal activity, obvious pay-for-play and corruption type scandals, and obvious gross disdain for the general public of the country. She's talked like disparaged Catholics as an entire group, which don't even vote necessarily as a block. So it's not like all, like Southern Baptists or evangelicals that tend to be more conservative. Catholics as a whole tend to mimic the vote of the country pretty well, which is why in the past, I think 40 years, ever since the late 60s, early 70s, whichever way the Catholic vote has gone as a majority, that's the way the election has gone, because the demographics of Catholics break down pretty similar to the demographics of the country as a whole. You have Hispanics that are Catholics, you have white people that are Catholic, and some of those white people are Democrats and some are Republicans, things like that. Some are conservative, some are liberal. So, and here she is on evidence, that she's making fun of these people as a whole. It's total disdain for the entire group of Catholics. That can't be helping. It's just scandal after scandal after scandal, a huge barrage. It's slowly wearing down support for her campaign. And like I mentioned before, the support for Trump, I think, is much higher than showing due to the shy voters, the monster vote, and all these other reasons, the collusion with the pollsters, outright bias, flaws in methodology. But this is just an absolutely unprecedented barrage of scandal that no other politician has ever had anything close to this number and this level of just wrongdoing that's been exposed to the public. So it's hard to imagine that there's that many people that really hate Trump that badly that she can overcome this stuff. And then you add into the fact that she's deteriorating badly with her physical state. We saw at the debate she looked all fresh, and I think she's on various kinds of drugs too. Not necessarily illegal drugs, but prescription drugs and things like that, pharmaceuticals to keep her propped up for an hour or two at a time. We saw her pass out at the 9/11 memorial. We saw her look fairly fresh in the beginning of the second debate. By the end of it, she was leaning on her stool a lot. Her eyes were closed, like she was about to fall asleep or have a seizure. And then afterwards, in her plane, speaking with reporters after the second debate, which I will put a link in the description to this video because it's one of the most compelling, I think, evidences of her having some kind of seizure. And you cannot watch this video and tell me that this was a voluntary movement. It's much worse than the one where she goes like, oh, and then shakes her head. And I think it's the same sort of seizure, which you'll have these like seizures like that, and they're involuntary, especially with her eyes. They always start with her eyes. And And she tries to recover for it by smiling and being like, and moving her head. But this one is much more pronounced, where you see her eyes go like pull, and she's not doing it on purpose. Her eyes pulled aside, and then she kind of recovers and smiles like, oh, grimaces, and then you see this neck muscle start like pulsing, and you can't do that voluntarily. You can't make your neck muscle do that. I'll post a video. It's very bizarre. It's definitely some kind of medical condition. So that could obviously bring her down as well. She's reportedly going into seclusion after the debate until the election. People are saying that she's not going to do anything. She's going to try and coast. And some people are even saying that they recommend she not even do the second or the third debate, things like that. So she's definitely not doing well physically. Trump has actually called for a drug test, which is hilarious because we've had people come out and say, oh, I think he's on cocaine because he's sniffling or something. And he's saying, let's do a drug test, which is awesome because now he has the high ground on that thing, saying, oh, you know what? If you think I'm doing drugs, we'll do a drug test. So let's just have her do one too. He's known for not even drinking alcohol. It's ludicrous to think that he would do cocaine. It's obvious that it breathes in through his nose in between speaking, and they purposely turned up the gain or did something on his mic to where you could hear all the mouth sounds and breathing. It's fairly obvious the different sounds you can hear between the two microphones in the debates. He made the complaint after the first debate that, oh, my microphone is broken, and people were all laughing at him, saying like, oh, the mic controller's broken excuse. But then within a few days, the committee said, yeah, there was something wrong with his microphone, and they kind of just brushed it under the rug. So there's just no depths to which they will go to try and undermine this, given the absolute avalanche of scandal that Hillary Clinton has been facing. Unprecedented in American politics, maybe even in world politics. It's absolutely crazy. This video's gone long enough. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you later.